You're listening to Kayak Flyer with your host, Sean. This week we're brought to you by Tennessee Trailers, OutdoorAdventureTrailers.com, the best way to get your kayak to and from the water. Cutthroat Furled Leaders, the only leaders that I use. Cutthroat Furled Leaders are guaranteed to perform for whatever species of fish you're chasing. Check them out at cutthroatfurledleaders.com. Save 15% promo kayak. Stoneflynets.com, the very best in handcrafted and custom fishing nets made in the great state of Arkansas. Check out Stonefly Nets at stoneflynets.com. All right, gang, welcome back to another episode. Hopefully you listened to and enjoyed our episode with Ron Mayfield prior to this, when we were talking about his designing a fly for Umpqua. Today, we're going to be talking about bass fishing. For somebody who may not have listened, Ron, do you want to explain to him a little bit about your tying and fishing experience?
Oh, well, I'm going to make myself sound really old. I've been fly fishing and fly tying for 50 years now. I started when I was a very, very young kid, very young. And I've been fly fishing. So I grew up in the Texas Gulf Coast area. A lot of warm water, a lot of salt water. Grew up fishing sand pits since I was little bitty. Lots of sand pits in this area. All my buddies would ride our bicycles out to the sand pits and go fishing all day. And I learned a lot by doing that. I also spent a lot of time in the water with the fish. I love to snorkel. And so you become a naturalist. You learn a lot about the habitat and how the fish react to certain things, how they react to sound and sight and all sorts of noises. When we're swimming in the sand pit and we snorkeling with the fish, we can just see how they react to all of that. So then I fished a lot of the big East Texas impoundments, the big lakes that we have. And then, of course, one of the best kept secrets, we talked about this, is the Texas Hill Country streams, the crystal clear limestone streams in the Texas Hill Country. Yep. So, yeah, I've done a tremendous amount of bass fishing in my life.
Yeah. A friend of mine who was just on the show a little while, Mark Usick, went and did the Devil's River last year down in Texas. And that is, they have a lot of regulations around it, but there's reasons why. Have you ever gotten a chance to go out there?
I have not. The Devil's River is the westernmost of the Texas Hill Country streams. And it flows, instead of in the Gulf of Mexico, it flows into the Rio Grande. Right. But it is, having talked to Texas Parks and Wildlife biologists, it is the standard for clear water for Texas waters. It is the clearest water, and it's probably the best smallmouth fishery that we have in the state. So a lot of very clear, cold springs flow into that river. So no, I've done almost all of the Hill Country streams except the Devil's River because it's very, very remote. It's tough to get to.
Yeah, and once you're on there, you have to stay on there. Yes. I think they did 3 or 3.5 days. And then it's really, you can't be intrusive in any way. And there's a lot of regulations, but if somebody's looking for a once in a lifetime place to go, that's a great place to look at. So today, we're talking about bass already. I think we're just going to talk about bass fishing. I know bass fishing's kicked off here in Missouri. Our stream season just opened up to keep bass. They should be off the beds. And it seems like a lot of the kayak tournaments are already kicking in gear. I know Nick Chabaria just fished one this weekend. So we've got a lot to talk about when it comes to bass fishing.
Yeah, I love bass fishing, especially topwater bass fishing. One of the most fun things I love to do.
Yeah. And so what comes along with that are some different flies and some things of that nature, and when to fish topwater as opposed to when not to fish topwater. Everybody says just hit topwater morning and evening, but I found you can sort of coax them up just about any time of day. How about you?
Yeah, because we fish a lot of structure and a lot of like lily pads. So as long as the fish are, because the sun hurts the fish's eyes. So I don't know if you've ever been underwater in the heat of the day and looked straight up. The sun goes right into your eyes. Mm-hmm. So same thing with the fish, because we talked about this before. To understand how a fish feeds, you look at it, it's the structure of its mouth. And a bass's mouth faces up. So they're typically near the bottom and they feed up, which means they're looking up, which means if they're in clear water in the middle of the day, they're looking up into the sunshine and it blinds them just like it blinds us. So they're always looking for shade and for cover, which means, yes, you can catch them in the middle of the day, but you need to have flies where you can cast into heavy cover, into structure, and around lily pads.
Yeah, and that's something that I've noticed too. It's whenever I'm out fishing a lake or even on the rivers, the structure, number one, but two, any shady overhang places seem to be the best places to catch. And it has to do with the way they're looking up. And it's whether or not I'm flipping a crawdad imitation on my fly rod, or if I'm throwing a popper or a swim bait, I always target those shaded areas first, or
Mm-hmm.
those areas that are very heavy with downed logs and things like that. And you as you fish, you learn to do these things, but a lot of people don't understand why you do those things. And you've done a lot of research on this.
Oh, yes, I have. I've read every book that I can find on it. There is some literature out there where people have done underwater surveys where they're actually scuba diving and going in and looking, and they're in some of the clear rivers. One book I read, it was primarily done in Florida. But yeah, the bass will, if they feel safe and they have cover and structure, they will congregate into certain areas until they start getting pressure. And so, if you can find that structure, you can find several bass in just one area. So,
Yeah, and that's really, I think we talk about honey holes, but that's really sort of where that
that's it.
comes from. I mean, because they're all held up in one spot, and that's because, I mean, you can float we've got a lot of clear Ozark streams up here, and you can float down the middle of the river and you won't see any fish. The sun's beating down and there's nothing there. But the minute you get to a bluff or an overhang or something where it's shaded, man, it's time to start fishing.
Yeah, very much so. Because again, to be a good fisherman, you think like a fish. You need to experience what a fish experiences. So that's why, as a kid, I snorkeled a whole lot. And I mean, if you're snorkeling in the water, turn upside down and look up in the middle of the day and see what you see. And that's exactly what the fish are going to be seeing.
Exactly. Exactly. And then there are other things, the pop with the top water, a lot of that pop and that sound is really getting their attention. I know a lot of guys will use rattle traps, those little glass rattle traps that they'll put in their flies. And there are all sorts of different things that you'll do for bass that you may not do so much for some other fish.
Yeah. So fortunately, bass, because of the popularity of bass and all the big bass tournaments, there's probably more research done on black bass than any other fish that I've ever seen, as far as what stimulates them, what stimulates them to bite. And in reading these books, you learn that fish, bass, have the same senses that we have. They see, they smell, they taste, they feel, and they hear. So when you're designing flies, you need to understand how they react to their environment and in what order. So when a bass, okay, their vision is usually will go further than anything else. If they're in clear water, again, it varies depending upon the environment, but if they're in clear water, they're going to see something. Like I have fished in some very clear waters up in East Texas, spring-fed ponds, where I've casted a deer hair bug in and just let it sit. And from 10 or 12 feet away, I see this wake coming.
Yep.
Okay, so that either that fish saw that, which is what I think, or they heard it hit the water. So there's this initial stimulation, and it gets the bass's attention. So depending on the conditions, it may be a sight, and then they start moving toward it. They may have felt it or heard it. So feeling, they feel differently than we do. They feel primarily with their lateral line,
right,
which is very, very sensitive. So they can feel even small fish swimming through the water. So as anything moves through the water, it creates waves. And the way the lateral line works is it can feel those waves, those pressure waves in the water. Very, very sensitive. So, whatever initially stimulates the bass, it gets their attention. They may see it, they may feel it, they may hear it, and eventually they're going to come up. And sight is usually right before they strike. They're looking at it in its sight. Then as soon as they bite it, or before they bite it even, they're going to be coming up toward it. They can smell it.
Mm-hmm.
They have very sensitive smell sensors for underwater. And eventually, if they do go ahead and grab it and bite it, then they're tasting it when they get it in their mouths. So you have to take that into consideration when designing flies. Every one of those different senses and how the fish in that particular environment is going to react to what your fly is designed to do.
Right. Yeah, that's very important. I mean, understanding all of those. Hopefully by the time they taste it, it's not too late to set the hook.
Well, I don't remember if I shared this experience with you, but taste, I learned the hard way about taste. So I was tying a deer hair baitfish pattern to use on bass, and I was trying to get some sparkle in the hair, and I couldn't figure out how to get the sparkle in the hair. I did figure out how to do it eventually, but I was trying all sorts of different things. So I got some epoxy and put some glitter in it. Then I was dabbing that epoxy on the deer hair. And I made the mistake of using 24-hour epoxy, not 5-minute epoxy. Yep. So I tied this fly one evening. I got up early the next morning to go to my favorite sand pit. I started casting this fly. It's a great looking fly, and I was getting lots of hits. But I was only getting hookups 1 out of every 3 hits, which is a very low percentage, very low. So what the heck's going on here? So I switched flies to one of my regular flies, and I was starting getting hookups 3 out of 4 hits, which is more normal. And so what happened to this fly? Well, I tasted it.
Yeah.
And that epoxy, because it hadn't dried, was nasty tasting.
Oh, yeah.
And what was happening is the bass were hitting it, putting it in their mouths, tasting the epoxy, and spitting it out before I could set the hook.
Yep. And, I often wonder about the UV resins. I don't know how much you use those, but I've gotten some, you're trying to do something and you get a little bit on your finger and the next thing it's on your glass and then you taste it and it just got such an odd, distinct, obviously you don't want to drink it. It's probably toxic, but I probably lost a few brain cells to that. But I've always wondered if that, even after it's cured and it's been in your box and everything else, if that's actually going to retain any kind of taste.
Yeah, I've had flies that have been in my box. When the epoxy craze came out, I started using it. And I had some tarpon flies in my box that a year later, I tasted them and they still tasted bad.
Yeah.
So I haven't, since then, I've gone away from those. But there's a bunch of different kinds out there now, and some people swear some of them don't have taste. Some people swear it doesn't matter. The fish hit it and grab it, and they still catch a lot. But I'm always concerned about smell and taste. Like one time I bought this really nice piece of deer hair, big long strip of deer hair, real thick, good stuff. But whoever tanned it out decided it stunk, so they put perfume on it.
Oh,
like perfume that my wife wouldn't wear perfume.
Yeah.
And I started making flies with those, and the fish were coming up and then at the last second turning from them.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling they were coming up close, and because the perfume is water soluble, they got close enough they could smell that and they go, "What the heck is that?" And they were turned off.
Yeah.
So I threw that piece of hair away.
Yeah, I forget who it was I was talking to now, but they were telling me, I guess it was the WD-40. The guys used to spray WD-40 on their trout flies. And back in the olden days, back when you were a kid.
Okay, if you're in a moving trout stream, because I've had people say too, "Oh yeah, I go get some UV spray and put it on my fly line to protect my fly line." Okay, if you're fishing in a stream where you've got constant water movement, it's going to dissipate that smell pretty well. I mean, I wouldn't put it on your fly though, because as soon as that trout hits it, he's going to taste it.
Yeah.
You see underwater pictures of trout, they're constantly putting stuff in their mouth. The little sticks come by because their vision is not really actually very good. A fish's vision is it's not near as good as a mammalian eye.
Right.
God, what was it? The Borger book, he was a biologist. He said our human eye is 13 times better at distinguishing things. So if you see underwater pictures of trout, they're putting little sticks in their mouths, this and that. And as soon as they put it in their mouth, they taste it. If it tastes good, they eat it.
Right.
If they don't, they just spit it out. And if you've ever taken stomach contents out of a trout, sometimes you'll see sticks in their stomach too.
Yeah.
Right. So sometimes they even swallow it. So where's I going with that? So all that visual taste that's important. If you're in still water and you've put stuff on your fly line and you're stripping your line, you're leaving a scent trail.
Yeah.
And fish are going to smell that. When they come up to the fly, if you've stripped that 5 or 10 feet, you now have a scent trail in that still water for 5 or 10 feet. And I've seen fish come up and turn away, and I think they got in the scent. So when I'm in lakes and when I'm saltwater fishing, I clean my lines before every trip. And I use an organic soap that has anise oil in it, because anise oil is an attractor for fish. And I very thoroughly clean my fly lines and make sure. And I also, before I tie flies, I use that organic, natural anise soap and wash my hands.
I'll have to
get some of that. I don't want any oils from my hands.
Yeah, I'll have to try some of that. See, I just eat a lot of garlic while I'm tying my flies and get all that garlic oil on everything.
So you don't catch many Dracula fish?
No. No, I don't. Actually, I do have I've got one of my good friends. He's a tournament kayak fisher, so he's a gear guy. But whenever we go fishing, he's always out fishing all of us. But he's always got some kind of marker that's a scent marker that he puts on things, and he really, I mean, he's working through all of it. I know a lot of fly guys, the scents are kind of off limits when it comes to talking about applying some of those to some people. And then I know other guys that just douse their flies in it and go crazy, So I guess it really depends on the type of person.
Yeah, some people think, oh, that's ethical. You're putting something that smells like real bait. It's almost like bait fishing.
Yeah.
Like get an earthworm and rub it on your fly, on your net before you throw it in the water. I don't know. It's kind of a gray area for me. But and I very intently do not get smells on my flies.
Right.
Or on my leaders or on my fly lines.
Right.
Because I did read an article about a guy who was a sports writer back in the 50s. Now, there's no way I'm going to remember his name. But it was a really funny story. He said, when I got to be about 7 or 8 years old, my dad started taking me to the fishing camp with his buddies. And I outfished everybody.
Yeah.
And I outfished everybody every year. By the time I got to be 12 or 13, they stopped inviting me because I outfished them every year. So he and his dad did an experiment. When he baited his dad's line, his dad caught more fish. When he baited his own line, he caught more fish. It turns out that there's a protein that mammals produce that some types of fish are very, very sensitive to. I can't remember what the name of the protein is. It's one of the books that I read.
Mm-hmm.
And especially salmonoids are very, very sensitive to it. So they did an experiment. They took a grizzly bear paw and stuck it in the water in one of the salmon ladders. As soon as they did that, the salmon stopped coming up the ladder.
Right.
They stuck a human hand in the water. Same thing. The salmon stopped coming up. That's all it took was that smell from your hand to keep, and the fish could recognize that. It's like parts per hundreds of million. They can smell this little protein. So I'm constantly trying to keep all of that off my hands when I'm tying flies or when I'm working with my equipment.
Yeah.
And then you have people who aren't real careful. They're in a boat, and there may be oil or gas in the bottom of the boat, and a lure or a fly gets dropped. Oh, those nasty chemicals, yeah, the fish can smell those. And they can.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. And then you've got, people that are handling their flies, and they've got their flies, sitting somewhere that there's just a musky smell, maybe in the back of your truck with your old waders, and it just all gets in there. And it's, there's all kinds of ways that we don't think, as opposed to the guy who's sitting there and being absolutely perfect with his fly, but then he doesn't think about handling it or his hands or anything like that. So that is really interesting.
Yeah, I actually, people think I'm nuts. I actually taste everything I put on a fly.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. I mean, it really does when it comes down to, if that is one of the things and we've all seen fish swim up and turn away.
Mm-hmm.
And so there obviously has to be something there. And it's, most people say, well, it didn't look right. And I'm like, more probably it just didn't smell right. Because from my understanding, I have a limited understanding on their visuals, but it is, like you said, much, much lower than ours. So when they get right up to it and they turn. But then again, when you think about these guys who buy artificial bait, there's a reason why they smell the way they do, and that's a very important part of it. So what kind of bugs other than topwater are you looking at whenever you're going bass fishing?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. So I've been tying some really interesting flies here recently for bass fishing. So people have come out with some really nice hooks. This is a Kelly's belly bumper hook.
Oh yeah,
with this centered.
Okay, so it's a deer hair up front, and then is that a zonker or is that?
Yeah, it's two rabbit strips, a white and a green on top.
Yeah,
and I put a little bit of. I don't think you can see that. Hope you can see that. Put a little bit of lead-free weight on it so that it sinks. It sinks like this, and then put the solid doll eyes on it, and you have a really nice profile of a little bait fish.
What is your opinion on eyes?
Oh, look at these eyes. Let me see if I can do this from the front, if my camera will pick that up. See those eyes? That looks just like a little bait fish. I love these solid plastic doll eyes. I use them on everything. everything. So you really do, because all predators key in on eyes. And that's one thing that scientists have proven over and over. Because if the predator knows that the bait fish is looking at them, the predator knows there's not a. It reduces their probability of making a catch or a kill. So those eyes, the predator fish are keying on those eyes. So any eyes that really look realistic, I like them a lot. So almost exclusively, I use these solid plastic doll eyes on all my deer hair. Love them.
Yeah, it seems like there's certain people that absolutely you have to have eyes on things, on flies, especially on streamers. And then there's a group of folks that really don't think it matters that much. I've always been on the fence about it. I put eyes on just because I like to put eyes on. I've never really thought about it as far as whether the fish prefer it or not. But it does make sense if they're keying in to see which way it's facing or what it's doing, that it would assist in, or at least make it look more realistic.
I also tie plastic worm flies.
Oh, nice. So it's like a zonker with, or a leech pattern with a rabbit, or with the deer hair, and the rabbit on the back. Yeah.
Yep. Lots of action.
Mm-hmm.
And here's one of the tricks of this fly. If you haven't seen this, can you see that? Let me see. Can you see that monofilament loop?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So you tie the monofilament on the bottom, then you tie the bunny strip, and you poke a hole in the bunny strip, and you loop that monofilament through it, and then tie the monofilament back down. And that way you're guaranteed that that bunny strip is not going to get looped around the hook, so it won't get fouled.
It's not going to foul. Yeah. Now, do you put a lot of brush guards or weed guards on yours?
Again, it depends on where I'm fishing. This one I'm going to be fishing in open water, so this one does not have it. But if I'm fishing in, here's another example of a plastic worm for fly fishing. Yeah, I'll put a heavy-duty weed guard on it.
Yeah.
And if I'm fishing in really, really heavy cover, I'll do a double weed guard. I don't have one of those handy. Yes, very much so. Weed guards.
Yeah, I've noticed that there's a lot of times where it's putting the hook point up, depending on where you're fishing, changes the way you get snagged. I like to fish a lot of streamers hook point up, just because of that. I fish a lot around logs and things of that nature, and don't put a lot of weed guards on. But a lot of my top waters, I do make sure that I have weed guards on. If you're fishing around lily pads and things like that.
Yeah, so let's talk about weed guards. So here's a weed guard on this fly. And if you notice, well, I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but I tied it in really high up on the hook. So the weed guard, it moves easily away from the hook. So you get a good hookup percentage. But it also moves away easier if you get onto a limb.
Right.
So you have more bass hookups, but you also have more limb hookups. So depending on what kind of cover you're fishing, like this one is mainly for fishing in grass, where there's a lot of grass beds. But if I'm fishing a lot of structure, heavy structure, I will tie the weed guard further down the hook.
Yeah.
And if I'm in really, really heavy structure, I'll tie the weed guard in all the way down to the bottom bend.
Okay.
Now it's going to be less hookups on the bass, lower percentage on the hookups in the bass, but it's also lower percentage hookups because it's harder for the monofilament to get out of the way.
Right.
Less hookups on brush, sticks and stumps and stuff. So again, knowing where you're fishing, determine where you want to tie in the weed guard. Right.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Do you guys fish a lot of crawfish patterns down there?
Not on fly rod, no. Because when we're bass fishing, especially in the big lakes, the crawfish are going to be down pretty deep.
Yeah.
We're talking 4, 5, 6 feet deep. And it's, unless you want to use a sinking tip, it's hard to get down there. And it's just my personal preference too. I'm sorry, topwater bass fishing is just way too much fun. It's a hoot.
I've noticed in our streams, if I throw a crawfish imitator in, it never hits the bottom. If I'm going to catch a fish in that hole, it's never going to get to the bottom. If
Yeah.
it hits bottom, I may as well recast because that's the end of it. Because if they're either there and they're getting it as it goes through the column or it's done. Rarely on occasion you'll have one swim by and pick it up, but that's very, very rare for the clear water that we have. But I know it's a very popular pattern. And then a lot of guys are using the dragon tails or alligator tails. It's just the chenille that's just tapered, and using a lot of those. I've tied up a few of those, but I've never had any real luck with them before. I don't know if it's I'm not fishing them right in the right spot, but I haven't messed a whole lot with them like I should. I didn't know if maybe you had, or
I
there
haven't
was a
either, because I
material
look
you
at them and
prefer.
go, what the heck are they imitating?
The what?
I look at them and I go, what the heck are they trying to imitate there? I'm sure it has a lot of action in the water, but it just doesn't look like anything I've seen in the water.
I've seen them tied up. I've tied mine like a worm. So sort of like where you had, the deer hair, I'll put a dubbing on there. And so and a eye, so it'll sink down, and then I'll put a little bit of floatant on the tip of it, so the tip of it will stand up and dance.
Well, that's
And
interesting.
and then I've seen them done where a guy will put a popper head on them, and then fish them almost like they're a snake coming across the water.
That would work.
Yeah,
Yeah, because most fish, if you look at them from the front, they're narrow. And those are almost cylindrical.
Yeah.
So they don't really look like anything but a snake.
Yeah.
They don't even look like a salamander. Salamander still has a tail on it. So, no, I haven't tried those yet. I have too much fun with bunnies and deer hair.
What is your favorite material?
My favorite material?
Yeah, to tie with. Deer hair.
Deer hair. And for lots of reasons. So going back to what do fish sense, what do they feel? I was working on some saltwater patterns with some guides down the Texas coast, and I kept hearing the same thing over and over. Ron, I need a fly that pushes water.
Mm-hmm.
Because, again, if it pushes water, it makes pressure waves in the water, and the fish can feel that, and it will attract them. And so I like deer hair because I can control exactly how much volume I have and how much water that I'm going to push with that fly. And it's also a great medium for doing things like putting eyes on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so I love it. It's so creative. And here, let me show you. Oh, this is one of my favorite patterns. Where'd it go?
Oh, that's absolutely beautiful. So it's just a deer hair popper with a little bit of barred schlapping on the back for folks that aren't watching.
It's not really a popper, though. Let me show it to you this direction.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
One of the ways you can see it.
Going to go ahead and swim it down.
Well, what I'm doing is I'm mimicking a bait fish pattern. This is my sunfish pattern. And what do the fish see from underneath?
Yeah, they see the color on bottom.
That. So let me see if I can put something behind it so you can better see it. You see that profile?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that looks great. I mean, the head's a bit wider, and then it thins out back towards the tail.
Mm-hmm. That's what, if a bass is directly beneath it, that's the profile that you want. Now, the other benefits of this fly, well, first of all, you see the keel.
Mm-hmm.
See how it's very thin on the bottom?
Right.
Okay. So here's the trick. Let me try this. Okay, so this pattern came from an idea from a book called Bassin' with a Fly Rod by Jack Ellis. And he has the concept of what he called the secondary hatch. The primary hatch is mayflies, or in Texas, unfortunately, a lot of mosquitoes are hatching off the lake. That's a primary hatch. And what are feeding on those mosquitoes and mayflies? Small sunfish.
Right.
The secondary hatch is the bass feeding on the sunfish.
Right.
So this is a fly that mimics sunfish feeding on the surface. So we're going to use our buddy Dwayne's card.
Okay.
So this fly is designed to sit in the water about right here.
Oh, just breaking the surface at the top.
Just breaking the surface. That's how it floats. Okay. Now, the trick is, if you don't make that keel, then here's the formula. if the deer hair that's on the bottom side of the hook shank has more buoyancy than the weight of the hook from the curve to the point, you got that?
Right.
The hair underneath the shank has more buoyancy than the weight of the hook from the curve to the point, the fly will turn on its side. And now I've lost that, what I'm looking for as a bait fish feeding on the surface. So this fly is designed to sit in the water just like this. And when you retrieve it, it dives down about 3 inches. And then let me do this again. It dives down about 3 to 4 inches and then floats back up. Nice. And the guys in my club named this the Mohawk minnow. You see the little mohawk on it?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. I didn't name it, they did. That mohawk is there for a reason. If you've ever heard a sunfish feeding on the surface, when it pulls a bug off the surface, it'll suck it in. Yeah. And it makes a little slurping sound, and sometimes it'll make a little bubble. Well, that deer hair, that little mohawk deer hair sitting above the water, when you pull it down, it actually will suck in a bubble.
Right.
And make a little slurping sound.
How long did it take, number one, to design that, and number two, to tie one of those?
Okay. So it took me a couple years.
I was going to say.
Let me show you version 1. I think I got version 1. Yeah. So here's version 1. Okay. That's version 1 that I tied probably 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's caught probably over 50 bass. You can see how messed up it is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And now here's the final version.
Yeah,
so
those
you can see how much refinement it went through.
Yeah, those are two totally different flies.
Yeah, so that was, and I teased my wife. I said, my wife's name is Laurelyn. Laurelyn, you know, I'm working on a new fly design. I need some more field research on this design. Don't have it quite right yet. I got just more field work on it. Yeah. And so this was quite a bit of field work to come up with a fly like this. Now, how long does it take to tie? So I have a technique I call flaring. This is not spun hair. Mm-hmm. You can't get these little lines in it because these are all different color deer hair. You can't get those lines in there in space just right by spinning hair. So I can't really do flaring. But if people will go to YouTube and search on Al Beatty's channel for fly tying, I did a session for Al. He recorded it, and I have 3 cameras set up, and it shows exactly how to flare hair. When you get the technique down, this is very fast. This is only about a 15-minute fly.
Wow.
Yeah. And when you do it right, it's a very good fly. It's a very tough fly. Okay, so here's the before. Mm-hmm. Here's after 50 bass.
Wow.
See how dark
that thing is just shredded. Yeah, just shredded.
You can see the bass broke the eye. These are hollow plastic eyes.
Yeah.
One of the bass even busted the eye.
Wow.
So
that is insane.
But it's a very effective fly. Yeah. Very, very effective.
Yeah. When I saw you down at Salbug and we got to talk and you showed me how to flare, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, I wasn't home very long, and I went ahead and ordered a bunch of deer hair. And I have been working with deer hair since then, just because of seeing you and Mike George, and what you guys could do with deer hair was just unbelievable. And so I've actually started tying an articulated. I only use a single hook, mainly because I'm too clumsy and I'll hook myself. But I'll put articulations on the back of it, and I've started tying a sculpin, and it's all pheasant feather and then deer hair for the head.
There you go. Those are great flies.
Yeah, and I've tested a couple of them out, and they swim great. They look great. I'm just amazed by it. But I would not have decided to go back and try deer hair again had it not been for you showing me that flare method, which makes it so much easier.
Success! I converted another person.
You did. I mean, even though we didn't spend a lot of time going over it. I mean, we sat down, and there were a lot of folks that sat down with you, but to see how easy that was as opposed to trying to spin. Now, next year we need an entire day at the Salbug on trimming, because there's nothing worse than getting all that deer hair in there and then one small razor blade move and it's over.
Well, that's the main reason, because I'm ask anybody that knows me, I'm a klutz too.
Yeah.
These are my razor blades. I do
Okay.
not use razor blades. The first time I started trimming a fly that I'd spent all this time, full body deer hair fly like this, I
Yeah.
got the razor blade in there. I was trimming it, and I cut the thread, and it started to fall apart. It's like,
Yep. Been there.
especially when you stack. If you stack and you stack and you get a razor blade out, yeah, you can cut the thread. So I only use scissors. And a lot of these trims, like this keel,
Mm-hmm.
you only do with scissors. I don't know anybody who can do that with.
Yeah, I wouldn't. That's what I was sitting here going, how in the world could you do that with a razor blade? But and then it's funny because you see all these guys. They're like, okay, you hold the razor blade at this angle and the fly at this angle, and you push straight across, and it's like, okay, I'm going to try that. The next thing I know, mine's bald. It's too short. And it's wild how unforgiving deer hair can be, but it does make beautiful flies.
Yeah. So if you're tying something like a Dahlberg, yeah, razor blades are great. There's a lot of ways that you can bend the razor blade and get the curve of the head just right. I traded, this is a beautiful fly that a gentleman I met at the Salbug Tide, we traded some flies. It's just a beautiful Dahlberg.
Oh, yeah.
You see all the things that he did, all the spinning and stacking that he did on this one. It's really beautiful fly.
And being able to lay those
razor blades are good. Yeah. Not on this one, though.
Yeah. Being able to tie those different colors of hair in. I remember the first time I saw that, and I just couldn't believe how they did it and how you can layer all those in. And you start watching and looking, and it's absolutely beautiful how it gets done.
And it's not that difficult too. Once you learn that technique of flaring, you can get very specific on where you put your deer hair, and that's what I was after when I invented this technique. I wanted to mimic bait fish. And I wanted to be able to put the hair and the amount of hair exactly where it needed to go so that I could get the lighter colors on the bottom, the darker colors on top, and I can get all those vertical lines that pretty much every bait fish has.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's truly amazing to see. And I would highly suggest anybody that has a chance, if you're going to be at Salbug next year, that's you and Mike are definitely worth the drive over there to see. We won't talk about the other Mike. Mike Lack. We won't talk about him, but it was really a good time, and there were a lot of great fly tires.
Oh, that's the first time I've been to Salbug this year. I've been wanting to go for years and years.
Okay.
That was a great show. There's so many amazing tires there. I need to go one year and not tie, just so I can walk around and learn.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm going to do next year. I'm just going to go and walk around. I'm going to take an empty fly box, so I can have a full fly box when I leave.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. A lot of tremendous tires there. Good.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about something else too.
Yeah.
Let's talk about designing flies. This is something that someday I'm going to write a book. When I retire, I keep saying that year after. When I retire, I'm going to write a book on flaring deer hair and designing flies. So let's go back to that Dahlberg. Where'd that Dahlberg go? Okay, so here's a Dahlberg. Very famous fly pattern. Very successful fly pattern. It's a pain in the neck to cast, though.
Yeah.
Because look at all that wind resistance. Got that big, I don't know what you call it, that big lip on it like that. So you've got a lot of hair on here. It gets heavy, and there's a lot of wind resistance. Well, what's good about this fly is when it gets in the water and you pull it, it displaces a lot of water, makes a lot of noise. So it attracts a lot of fish. Okay, so here's the challenge. How do you make something that's aerodynamic but still displaces a lot of water so it makes a lot of splash?
Yeah.
Okay. Going back to the Mohawk minnow. So this is very aerodynamic. In all aspects, it's very aerodynamic. With a 7 weight, I can cast this fly 60, 70 feet.
Okay.
Because it goes through the air very, very easily. But it also displaces a lot of water because of that keel. So it's sitting in the water like this, and when you pull it and it goes down, it pushes the water off to the sides. And if you pull it hard, it will make a really nice kerplunk.
And that keel is absolutely amazing. If you're just listening to the show, you need to head over to the YouTube channel because the keel is just unreal. Looking at it and how it functions, it's beautiful. I mean, it's hard to believe that you can make that with deer hair. I mean, it's just wild to me.
Well, the goal is, again, not have the fly flip, but still
Right.
have the profile of a little sunfish. That
Right.
was the goal. But then also the side effect is, yeah, if you really
Well,
pop this hard, it will make a really nice kerplunk and displace
right.
a lot of water because it's pushing a lot of water.
Yeah, because it's got that point, and then that flat is coming down against it, and you're just moving a lot of water around.
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah.
that the sound, yes, as we all know, that kerplunk, it attracts the fish. The fish can hear that and feel that in the water.
Yeah.
Now, so a lot of people tie your good old generic poppers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and a lot of people make a flat nose. Somebody at the Salbug showed me some flies that somebody had traded with him. And you ever see a jitterbug?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They made a fly jitterbug.
Yeah, they took the deer hair out, then they combed it down, then they epoxied it, right, to
Yeah,
get it to stay. Yeah, I think I saw one of those.
yeah, it looks amazing.
Yeah, but it's
I
gonna
would
be
not
rough
want
to
to try and cast
cast.
it. Unless
Yeah.
you're fishing in water where the stream's 20 feet, 30 feet across, I
Right.
wouldn't want to try and cast it. And I can only imagine how big of a kerplunk. So aerodynamics, again. So if you've got something big and flat on the front, it's not going to be very aerodynamic. It's not going to be very castable. But again, it's going to displace a lot of water.
Right.
So those are the main trade-offs when you're designing flies. How can I get something that will go through the water, make a lot of noise, but is still castable for the distances that you want?
Yeah. And that's one thing I've noticed a lot if I'm tying something with a lot of marabou or a lot of feather on it. After it's been in the water, it's a lot easier to cast because it's not catching as much wind, even though theoretically you would think it would be heavier because it's got the water weight in it. But the fact that it's not catching as much wind, and a lot of people when they're tying flies don't think about that.
Yeah. So here's one of my frog patterns, and I will round the front nose off to make it more aerodynamic, but it'll still catch fish because, especially when you're fishing frogs don't, unless they're fighting each other territory, they don't make a whole lot of noise going through the
Right.
water. So you don't need something that makes a lot of splash. You're more interested in the profile.
Yeah.
Now, this is a special kind of frog pattern, though.
It's got little legs on the front.
Correct. This is my lily pad jumping frog.
Okay.
So what I found out is with a normal fly, because I love fishing the lily pads, especially in the summertime because all the shade, the bass will
Right.
congregate up under the lily pads. So here's what happens with lily pad fishing. So here's a normal fly with a normal weed guard. And let me get something that's a little more visible. So here's the edge of the lily pad.
Okay.
What happens, a fly will come up to the edge of the lily pad and it will turn sideways.
Right.
When that happens, the lily pad will push the weed guard out of the way. I don't know if you can see that. The hook gets caught on the edge of the lily pad.
Right.
It's different than how a fly will go up over a limb.
Right.
Catches the edge of the lily pad. So that was the problem I was trying to solve because I was fishing flies like this in the lily pads. 80% of the time I was catching lily pads, not catching fish.
Right. Exactly.
So after much field research, Laurelyn, I need to go research some more. I came up with this design, which is in using that flaring technique, you can put bucktail, because you're not spinning.
Right.
You can put bucktail into the deer hair. So what I've done is I put two groups of bucktail into the hair, trim them to the right length that I want, and then coat them with Softex. So they're stiff, but they're still a little bit flexible.
Right.
So here's what happens. When it comes up to the lily pad, instead of turning sideways, the legs keep it straight, and it'll hop up on top of the lily pad.
Nice.
Yeah. And now instead of getting caught 80% of the time on the lily pads, I hardly ever get caught. Maybe 5% of the time I'll get caught. And what's really fun is when that frog gets up on the lily pad, especially if you're fishing some of the smaller lily pads, like some parts in Texas, we have lily pads that are 3 feet in diameter and they're real thick, but some of the smaller ones are translucent, which means in that bright sun, the fish can see the frog on the lily pad. And it is a hoot to have a bass come up out of the water and knock your frog off the lily pad.
Wow. Yeah, that would be that would be that would be.
That's a lot of fun. I've had that happen many times, fishing that fly on top of the lily pads.
Yeah. And it's really amazing because I don't watch a lot of videos on guys who do deer hair. But is anybody else doing something like that? Or are you sort of the one who's come up with it and are you seeing it being replicated anywhere?
Yeah, so I've been teaching this deer hair around Texas for a while. So there's people around Texas have been doing it, but only until recently have I gone, I hate to say this, gone national.
Right.
Now, more, instead of doing like one-on-ones, fly tying sessions, things, our local club meetings, yeah, I'm getting exposure more now in other places. So I got a feeling that more and more people are going to be doing it. So yeah, even I say national, there were some people from Australia on the Al Beatty session who were asking me all sorts of questions. So I think there may be people in Australia who are doing this technique now too.
Yeah. Well, Al's got such a great setup, and he's such he and I mean, he and Gretchen are such good people, and watching them do stuff together is wild. Anytime you get a chance to be involved with them.
If I knew half of what Gretchen and Al have forgotten, I would know twice as much as I know now. Those two are amazing.
Oh yeah, they are hilarious, and they're super nice people. You can't beat it. And then their show, their YouTube is amazing. So yeah, that's definitely something somebody needs to check out if they're not familiar with.
Yep, love those two. Yep. Love them.
So any last bass advice for us, or what do you got up your sleeve next here?
Oh, that's pretty much it. I really like these Kelly belly bumper hooks. There's all sorts of things you can do.
You mentioned those a while ago. Is that a new?
Yeah. So it's a keel hook.
Okay.
So keel, like Mustang used to make keel hooks like 20 years ago.
Right.
And I was using them for shrimp patterns. So I bought a whole bunch of them, and then they stopped making them. And I became very popular with the saltwater guys because But let me see if I can pull one out for you.
I've been using worm hooks that'll do that, but they're really big and really aggressive.
Yeah, worm hooks are tough.
Yeah,
I do tie with them, like when I do my Mongo frog.
Right.
You see how that's in the front? That's that 90-degree turn on the worm hook.
Right.
This is a great frog pattern because when I pull it hard, because the hook, it jumps.
It jumps.
It'll jump out of the water.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which is pretty cool. Yeah, so here, see if you can see that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's a nice hook. MFC.
Yeah,
premium.
They're very, very nice hooks. They're keel hooks. Let's see if I can get one. I don't think I have any. They're outside of the package. I'll look.
That's all right.
Okay, yeah, can you see what they are?
Yeah, you can see them really well on the YouTube. Yeah, you can tell those look great. Those look a lot better than trying to use a big worm hook that's, got a giant gap in it just to get it to keel right. I've done that with a lot of bait fish patterns. Now I don't want to, I've caught fish on them, but they're predominantly the bigger smallmouths in the area,
So Uncle recently came out with a bin back, which I'm also experimenting with. So let me show you this. Everybody can see that.
Okay, yeah. I can see that, yeah. And it's got a little bit of a bend there in it to keel down. Yeah.
So this works really well too. And I'm experimenting with, again, need more field work, but I'm using it for a saltwater pattern. Let me show this to you real quick. You can do this with it.
Oh, so yeah. Now that is an interesting bug. Can you describe that for us?
Sure. So I'll show you how. I'll give you the recipe.
Okay.
So first you tie in what are the gill materials. And this is the Crystal Chenille UV, bright red. So I've talked to some guides, they say, got to have that gill on there. Bright red really attracts the fish because when a bait fish is scared, at least in salt water, it'll flare its gills when it's
Right.
swimming fast. So that red will sometimes turn the fish on. Then you tie in the bunny strip. And you tie in barbell weight. It's right
Okay.
there. And
On
that's
the
to
bottom.
balance the fly. Because, okay, here's another concept when you're doing fly, especially streamers. You want to know where the center of gravity of the fly is. And you want that center of gravity to be near the middle or toward the front. Otherwise, when you pull that streamer and it stops, it'll sink butt first.
Right.
And I haven't seen anything in nature that sinks butt first. So it's not a natural movement. So you want your center of gravity to be at the middle. And if you do that, when you stop pulling, it'll stay level, or you want it forward a little bit, and it'll sink.
Mm-hmm.
So those barbell eyes are put in place to get my center of to counter the weight of the hook, to get my center of gravity almost to the middle of the fly.
Yeah. But you're not using those barbell eyes as the eyes. You're using those just as weight.
Just to balance the fly out, correct. Then I put deer hair on it. And again, you can, with the flaring technique, you can, because you're not spinning,
Right.
you can put deer hair over the top of that barbell eye.
Right. So
I don't know any other way to do that other than using that technique of flaring. So you build out the head, and again, you want that profile. You're looking, because when this gets wet, this comes down to nothing. It looks just like a little baitfish profile from underneath.
Right.
And you get those big, nice eyes on it. So this is a new fly. I've only fished it a couple of times. I took it out to one of my local ponds, which had some small bass in it, and tried it out. Caught a 4-pound catfish. What the heck? What's going on here? And then the next time I tried it out, I got to go fish down in the Everglades. And I caught 7 snook and a 30-inch redfish on this fly.
Wow.
It was a very, very good day. Oh, and I jumped about 3 or 4 baby tarpon. But this is not a good fly for baby tarpon because their mouths, going back to the mouth,
Right.
tarpon's mouth points almost exactly straight up. They were hitting it and not getting hooked up.
Right.
Because most of the time you want to hook up on the bottom lip of the tarpon. I got no hookups on the baby tarpon. But the snook and the redfish.
Oh, yeah. Dude, yeah.
So, yeah, this fly is, so on the conventional tackler, fishermen in saltwater, they have things called jerk baits.
Yep.
And they jerk them really hard and they dance in the water.
Mm-hmm.
This is my version of a jerk bait. And it's really effective. And it's like really, really good fly.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm trying to be modest.
That looks like one that you could probably sell the design for, because it looks like it's.
You know what? I sent this to Umpqua and they said, yeah, it looks really good, but it's too simple. We don't think it'll catch fish. I'm like, what? What? Because I mean that's the whole fishing industry. You know? Yeah. If it catches fish, that's secondary to catching fish.
Exactly. So yeah.
I'm still working on the design. As far as the action and the dynamics and the aerodynamics of the fly, because this fly you can cast with my saltwater. I use a 9-weight. This fly I can cast this fly 80 to 90 feet because it's just like a bullet.
Yeah, you're going down to backing on that fly. You know.
I need to make it prettier apparently, so I'm still working out how to make it prettier.
Well,
everybody write Uncle and say, okay, the name of this fly. You ready? Jerk me, because it's a jerk bait.
Exactly.
Everybody write Uncle and say, carry Ron Mayfield's jerk me fly. I want some of those.
I will be sending them an email right now. Well, that is a gorgeous fly, and if it's producing like that, that is absolutely amazing.
Well, the big thing is it's weedless.
Yeah.
So down in the Everglades, I was throwing it into the mangrove trees. Because the snook are up underneath the mangrove trees, and some of them are low hanging, and unless you're a perfect caster and you can, this far above the water, 5 to 6 feet up under the mangroves, you're going to be hitting the mangroves. I only got hung up one time. I cast it between 2 limbs and I got hung. The rest of the time I was bouncing off the guide I had was loving it because he wasn't spending any time getting flies out. But the main reason this fly is going to be very effective on the Texas coast is we have a lot of grass.
Mm-hmm.
Once you get south of Houston in the clear water, we have a lot of grass, and it's very fine grass. It's called shoal grass. It's like pine needles.
Mm-hmm.
And they grow on the bottom, but if a prop cuts them or they die, they float on the top, and they get hung up on everything. And so it's really tough fishing in that kind of grass. This fly will be, I think, pretty much 100% weedless.
Yeah, it should
We'll be
slide
able to
right through it.
throw it right up into the grass. Even in the late summer when that grass gets really, really heavy, we'll be able to throw this in there because the redfish and big trout will get up in that grass in the summertime.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. And I'm heading to the Chandelier Islands off the coast of Louisiana in 2 weeks. This is going to
Okay.
be a killer fly.
Where are those compared to Grand Isle?
So the Chandelier Islands are southwest of Grand Isle.
Okay.
The Chandelier Islands
They're
about 30,
back closer
35.
to Texas.
Yeah, well, yes, but they're still east of the Delta.
Right. Okay.
So we actually go out of past Christian, Mississippi, and go almost due south to hit the Chandelier Islands. And they're about 30, 35 miles off the coast.
Okay, yeah, I haven't been to those. We usually go to Grand Isle or like Port Sulphur.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Nice. This is nice because it doesn't get as much pressure because you're 35. We take a mothership out there, then get in a little bitty, 16-foot John boats, little 20 horses, and zoom around and go
Right.
wade fishing.
Yeah, yeah.
And,
that ought to be a heck of a good time.
Oh, it's a blast. I've done it several times. It's very productive fishing.
Yeah.
But this will be the first year I get to take the jerk me. So
take the jerk me. Well, you'll have to make some videos of you fishing that and getting hookups, and then send it to Umpqua.
Yeah, actually, I may have to get my GoPro and put it on my head. Here's number 1. Here's number 2. Here's number 3. Here's number 4.
Take plenty of extra batteries to change out and memory cards, so you can just send them a whole, 4 or 5 gigs of video.
Yeah, I'm sure that'll help my cause.
Ron, this has been great. I love talking with you, and that flaring technique, for anybody who doesn't know it, or if you're interested in deer hair or you want to see how deer hair can be done without spinning it, I definitely urge you to go over and check out the Al Beatty channel with Ron Mayfield on there.
Let me, just to set expectations, let me tell people what I'm doing.
Okay.
So just real quick. So here's the key to flaring. This is an egg weight, a 6-ounce egg weight. Mm-hmm. I cut the end off of, and I drilled a hole through it so that it fits over the stem.
Right.
Okay. This keeps a constant 3 to 4 ounces of pressure on your fly line. So deer hair is hollow. That's why it floats. And that's why when you wrap thread around it and pull down the thread, it compresses and folds up, flares up. Okay. But if you don't have weight on the thread constantly, the hair will pull up, will expand out. And then you have a very loosely tied fly. Before I figured this out, I was using this technique, but I'd catch 4 or 5 bass and my fly would fall apart because it was just too loose. It's this weight keeping the weight. And you don't have to do this, but as long as you have 3 or 4 ounces of weight constantly on the thread, you can do the flaring technique. That is the key to flaring.
Yeah, I make one of my kids sit there and just hold the bobbin down. It's like punishment. If they're in trouble, they just have to sit there and hold the bobbin until I'm ready. Yeah. So.
Well, I can't do that. All my kids have moved out.
Well, I'm pretty sure that weight would be cheaper than having kids.
Than the hassle of a kid, yes. Okay, so that's just the key. So be prepared when you watch the video. That weight, weight, 3 or 4 ounces of weight on your bobbin, and that's the key to flaring here. You're getting a good tight fly, so you can catch 50 bass on one fly without falling apart.
Right, and you can tell when you've done a fly if it's going to be good or not by how much give there is on the head when you push on it. If it's spongy, that's not good. It's not gonna. It should be pretty stiff.
Well, okay, let's talk about that. Okay, so where'd it go? Here. Okay, so this fly, the frog fly, I want it floating very high up in the water. Okay.
Right.
I'm going to get as much hair on there as I can. I'm going to flare hair, and I'm going to get my packer, and I'm going to stack that hair in. So this is as dense as wood.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This fly, I want it sinking. I don't want it on top. Remember, I want it to sink.
Right.
I want it to be right there in the water level. So I'm not putting as much hair on this fly.
Okay.
Because I don't want it floating up high. I want it to sink down and be almost submerged. So it depends, again, what you're mimicking, what you're tying, as to how much hair you get on there. And so this one is, I mean, I can touch and feel it. This is much, much looser than this frog pattern. This is probably twice as dense on the frog as it on the sunfish pattern. Okay. So another thing to think about, how much do you want to pack it down? Depends. How high do you want it? Or do you want it to sink below the surface?
Yeah, and you know, that's funny. It reminds me, I was with Rick helping him with the dubbing brush tables, Oasis dubbing brush tables down at the Salbug when we met. And we were talking, somebody was asking me about building a body with a dubbing brush and how to make a profile. And I said, well, you use the same dubbing brush all the way through, just you get closer and closer wraps for a taller, you know, and that's sort of the same idea is how much material you put in changes the density of it.
And how the fly is going to act in the water. That's
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All these are considerations in being a fly designer.
Yeah.
Understanding your target fish, what are their senses, what are they key on, what's your environment, what are they feeding on, and then how to design the fly to best mimic the environment that you're going into, whether you're in heavy brush or clear water or lots of grass. All these are considerations so that you can successfully catch a lot of fish.
Yeah,
Makes
definitely. Definitely. Well, dude, this has been absolutely great. And you want to go ahead and show the name of your fly that you can get from Umpqua, just in case people haven't seen it before, because I can't remember it off the top of my head.
It's called rattle mullet.
Okay.
Yeah, I can pull up one of those. So if you're saltwater fly fishing, here's a chartreuse one. Because what color can be seen the largest distance underwater?
Chartreuse, isn't it?
Chartreuse, yeah. That's one of the things you learn in doing the research. So this is a rattle mullet. And it's a deer hair, bucktail, hackle, a little bit of crystal flash, and it has a rattle embedded in it.
Yep.
And again, look at that profile. When this hair goes down to nothing, it looks just like a bait fish, just like a little mullet from underneath.
See, I think bass would nail that too.
Oh, I've had several people say, that if you have, because most of the places I fish, the primary feeder fish, bait fish, or sunfish.
Right.
Sometimes you'll have like minnows.
Mm-hmm.
This is not really the profile of a minnow. It turns out a mullet has a fairly fat head.
Yeah.
So this is not the profile of like a shiner, but it is very much a mullet. But yeah, people have told me, they've caught bass on these. But look at the aerodynamics too.
Oh, yeah. It's got to be great to cast. Yeah.
This fly actually has a little bit of positive lift. I can cast this fly 80, 90 feet on my 9-weight.
Nice.
And in salt water, that makes a difference.
It also helps that
length matters.
It also helps that you're a casting instructor.
I didn't know we were going to bring that up. Okay.
Your 80 to 90 feet is my 30 to 40 feet.
Okay. So let me to do a little compare and contrast. So this is my bass fly. This is my offshore. Same kind of deer hair pattern.
Right.
That's my offshore fly.
Just a minor difference in size there.
Yeah. Fun stuff.
What kind of vise are you using that holds that great big hook?
Oh, I love my Renzetti Traveler. That's all I've used for 30 years.
And it'll hold that big hook. And
it'll hold a 3 or 4 rod all the way down to a 20.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I'm in the market for a new vise. That's why I keep asking everybody.
Well, yeah. And I love the Renzetti because when I'm doing deer hair, and you'll see the video of the flaring, I need to set my hand on top of the vise.
Yeah.
And that Renzetti is just, for my hand, it's perfect. I can rest my hand on top of it and do all the deer hair that I need to do.
Cool.
I've actually, this is my second Renzetti. I wore the top of the first one off.
Well, I would think if you've got to tie every one that Umpqua sells, you've got a lot of. You got all.
God, that's not the case.
I'm surprised they let you off for the show.
Oh my God! That would take all the fun out of being a fly designer if I had to tie every single one.
I know. Oh.
Well, Sean, thanks for inviting me again.
Hey, I loved it, and I just love talking about fishing. And you're. I don't even know what to say about your ability to tie flies, your ability to do deer hair. I'm always amazed. And so it was great having you on.
Okay.
All right.
Well, someday we'll get some cameras hooked up and we'll do some demonstrations.
There we go. All right, gang, that's it for this week. We hope to be back next week. We'll see you then.
Thanks, Sean. Talk
Thanks.
to you soon.